Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Amber. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Ben. Looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a great episode. Let's dive into it. Every guest gets the same questions. What do you love about content and marketing? And then catch us up on your career a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I am really passionate about marketing and content marketing as a facet of that. Because to me, it feels like it really brings together both sides of the brain, like the left brain and the right brain. You know, you've got the data side, you've got the ROI calculations, but you also have the creative elements. When you're talking about execution of any campaign when it comes to content, you're talking about some calculations in Excel, but also playing around with words and images and video, which is incredibly satisfying as someone who enjoys both of those sides of the business. And my background, so I started on the business side, primarily financial services and tech. Spent about 10 years in underwriting and product development, and really diving into the ops side. Having exposure to marketing throughout that time is what resulted in sort of a full pivot over into full-time marketing about 7-8 years ago. So I really got the opportunity to see the lens of marketing and work on some of those go-to-market strategies and products and branding from outside of marketing, so that when I moved in, I felt like I was really ready to hit the ground running. And is something that I have found as just a great fit for my personality and my background. And I'm always passionate and happy to chat marketing with folks.
I love it. And I think this is so cool. This is going to be a fun conversation. Really quick before we dive in, though, I love your definition of what you love about marketing and content. I don't know if I've ever heard it articulated that way, but it really does encapsulate what I love about it as well. The left brain and right brain, you get such a good not only variety, but it's like the whole brain gets to be excited about marketing. So I love that definition. I've never heard it that way. So that's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like a lot of folks can probably relate.
That is true. Very true. So today we're going to talk about optimizing content for product launches. Every business does product launches differently. Every business has different struggles and different strengths, but they are a staple of marketing efforts. And I think every single one of us can get a little bit better at it. So today I'm excited to learn from you, Amber. When we're looking at product launches, what are some opportunities for us to grow and get better at it? And there's two sides to this coin. So I'm going to kind of ask on both sides. First and foremost is the external launch, right? Obviously, we're trying to tell customers about this, prospective customers, maybe get some media value, SEO, whatever it may be for the business. But on the flip side, the often neglected side is the internal product launch and how that functions with all those stakeholders. So maybe because we're probably going to talk about the external, a lot of people talk about that. Let's start with the internal and move to the external. How do you do an internal launch and have alignment when it comes to product launches? And what have you learned and how can we get better at that?
I love the immediate call out of the internal launch because I completely agree. It is the, less glamorous side potentially of the launch process. However, it's what sets up the external launch for success. And I would argue that that starts a long time before you even have a product to launch. And what that often can look like is an alignment around go-to-market strategy. So before you've got the product and you're talking about how you're going to roll it out, you have aligned as a leadership team, marketing, ops, engineering, product marketing around what you feel for your business, for your industry, what go-to-market should look like. And what I love to use as a template is like 4 quadrants, with kind of the effort and change on X and Y axis. So we're looking at like low hanging fruit, for example, on like the bottom left, all the way up to moonshots on the top right. So that you have this structure. And for each of these quadrants, you've aligned around, okay, well, if it's a low hanging fruit, if it falls into this classification, that means all we're going to do is call it out in our standing communication. We're going to have one sell sheet for all segments. So that you have that aligned. Whereas for the moonshot, as you would imagine, you're looking at PR blitz and an explainer video and, really going deep into long form content, white papers, etc. And then there's lots of gray in between there. But what I found really helps set teams up for success is having that alignment in advance. So when the product comes to the team or the new feature or the new segment, you have this structure to slide it into. So you're not starting from scratch. You're just assigning it into a quadrant that is applicable to the level of change and resources. And then from there, part of that is the internal element. And that's where you really want to back up from your external launch date to make sure that you have everything your internal teams need to get excited about, to feel like experts in. So, for me, that often looks like, okay, who needs this information? Obviously, business development and sales and what other client-facing teams you have. And then in other areas of the industry, if you sell through brokers or another intermediary, you've got another layer after that. But that you're thinking about the content they need. What internal content is that? An internal explainer video. I've done those in the past where you've got like a 3 to 5 minute explainer video that is internal only to walk through some of those things, live training, a case study, client quotes, so that all of that's packaged up and ready for your internal team so that they are prepared and feel confident and excited about what you're about to announce.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. I'm probably going to double click on a couple things that I'm really curious about. So first and foremost, you mentioned a term, customer testimonials, like getting some quotes about a product launch. What is your personal philosophy when it comes to product launches? Do you typically like to have the product in customers' hands for a while before you do the launch? Do you kind of preempt it and have it go live day one when it's in the product? What are some thought processes around that?
Yeah, great question. I love to have a test group of some form, of some context. Barring that, that's not always possible. I love to have a preview. So for example, if you have a client advisory council, that's a great group to tap into, get it in front of them, get reactions. So you have a sense for how you could possibly expect the broader market to react and have those quotes potentially for internal only, but potentially for external as well. If someone is really excited about something, it's worked well for them, or speaking to the pain point that it solves. I have a big challenge with XYZ in my operations, and I've been looking for something to fix that. Something along those lines. So I think those client quotes can really humanize what you're doing. And that's, I think, the element too for the internal launch that you're really trying to hit home is this is exciting for our clients. And we all care about our clients and are passionate about, solving their problems. And this is how it does that. So it's not just another bell and whistle. This solves a pain point that really hits that point home.
I love that. So the other question I had when you were talking, you mentioned the quadrant, and I love the quadrant with the X and Y axis, with the effort and time and impact and all that stuff. When you're looking at it, it sounds like you've templatized what materials and content is needed based off of where that launch lands in the quadrants. How did you determine what to put in those templates and what materials you needed? And how is that like an ongoing process, if it is, to figure out what needs what amount of efforts for what kinds of launches? How did you go through that process?
Yeah, great question. And this is something that absolutely evolves. I always preface, whenever I'm sharing the quadrant or the format, I preface it by saying, this is a living document designed to be edited as we go along. Because there may be 4 quadrants, but there's a lot of variance within those quadrants as well. But essentially what we've looked at is in a moonshot, we're going after a whole new segment with a whole new kind of product. So that's that quadrant. So what assets would need to exist to make that true? We can't rely on our existing channels, for example. If we are going after a whole new segment, they probably don't follow us on social. They probably aren't in our existing event strategy. So you're going to need a whole new event strategy for that. You're going to need PR. You're going to need to go outside of your general arena. So what assets would need to be created to make that true versus low-hanging fruit? You're just adding a feature, for example, onto an existing product. And what that looks like is, okay, so who does this impact? This is a change that's going to impact X% of users. How should we communicate with them? If it's a large enough change, maybe that is one-on-one meetings with BD and your large enterprise clients, emails to the rest, and maybe an email campaign, maybe a recorded webinar. But either way, it's going to be on a smaller scale. So aligning on what that looks like. And that's not a perfect science, of course, because there may be a new feature that one group views as low-hanging fruit, and the next group is like, oh, this is basically a moonshot because it could apply to XYZ new segments. And that's why we really need to have those conversations of what does success look like? Is success adding 15% more active users on our platform? Is it doubling? So the higher the growth goal that's implied by the new product, the new feature, the more assets, the more oomph you're probably going to want to put behind it. So that's the typical conversation flow that I think tends to lead to success and alignment.
I love it. And I love your term, the moonshot launches. And I think that every business hopefully has a few of these, or else you need to reconsider what you're doing a little bit. But for a product marketer or marketer in general who's looking at doing a launch for a moonshot, they can be kind of intimidating. What do you do if you don't have the greatest budget in the world, but have a moonshot of an opportunity that you need to get out there? Any advice, strategies, or recommendations that you've seen that would be really helpful for those kinds of people looking to make a big splash where they're unfortunately not equipped with as much resources as they would hope for?
Absolutely. You don't always have all the resources you feel like you need to get to the success level. That's probably the case more often than not, especially, those of us who have spent time on the startup side. And that's when you have to acknowledge an appetite for some level of risk. That's when you have to get a little bit more creative, cliche to say, but outside the box type campaign thinking, getting scrappy and being comfortable with that. And you really want to make sure that, your branding teams and your leadership teams, everyone's aligned on what that could look like. Is that a sassy-esque social media campaign where you have more personality than your competitor? Is that setting up your own, basement studio to record a talking head video? And certainly that's something that you can do relatively inexpensively. If you have a webcam, you have a production studio essentially. But if you want to level up, you can buy soft boxes and a teleprompter for, less than $500. So really diving in and assessing how high is your appetite as a team to be a little scrappy, to try something new, and what is your appetite for risk, and being super clear about that. And I've had really fun campaigns that were very scrappy. I, for example, produced a film trailer in air quotes for a new product where, we got a voiceover talent for $50, had our COO film some funny footage at home and, threw it all together for less than $100 total. But if your leadership team isn't willing to, take on that risk, then you have to be realistic about what you can achieve. So offering up a few different packages. I know agencies always do this. Here's like small, medium, and large, and offering that up to your leadership team and being clear about, if we do this moonshot, we feel our best chance of success is to take on a little bit of risk, is to add a little bit of personality and be a little scrappy. However, if we don't have the appetite to go there yet, here's, the medium option with the medium level of risk. However, we anticipate medium level results. So just being really clear about what you think you can achieve with what you have.
I love how you put that. That is super cool, especially with that spectrum of less budget for big results, higher risk. And I think that that's a really powerful formula that anyone listening can utilize, because I have been there. I wasn't able to articulate that nearly as eloquently or had that foresight, but I can already think back to several conversations where, had I had this interview, I would have been able to say, we don't have the budget. Here's the risk we're going to have to take. Are you comfortable with that? And have it be a conscious decision. I absolutely love that. I think that that is so powerful. Okay, so one final question, because we're running out of time. When it comes to product launches, you're producing content, you're doing all of these things. As a normal business, they're usually coming out on a regular cadence. How are you working on making sure each and every product launch gets a little bit better from the insights from the previous one? So what are you learning? How are you measuring? How are you growing? All of that kind of stuff. What's your process? Like, how do you review and improve? You talk about how your process is ever evolving. Curious how the previous launch and previous content and results impact the next one.
Yeah, I think what is so important to set yourself up to be able to do that well is to have your goals clearly outlined at the beginning, which I find is always easier said than done because you want to be really clear when you start the launch. What do we want to achieve with that? Yes, growth, but specifically, in what segments and how fast? What is our goal? And then checking in, did we achieve it? And being really transparent and clear about that. Because you don't always hit your first quarter goals, second quarter goals, but being able to look at that and say, okay, we didn't. And this is why we think we didn't. Let's look back. And I often think that marketing metrics like views or engagement, things like that, are often viewed as vanity metrics. And I would argue that they're actually leading indicators. So it doesn't tell us who closed, but it helps us understand the direction of what may happen from a revenue perspective down the line. So while they're not the end all be all, I do still like to look at those and consider them as we're looking at a launch. And then, of course, following up later is, okay, so we had a spike in engagement with the content. Did that result in a spike in closings? Maybe, maybe not. But having that framework to be able to look back so that next time you can iterate. And this is where I think it helps to look at your 4-quadrant framework. So for example, maybe we had a new segment that we were looking after, but not a moonshot. So like bottom right. So we had this package and then having internal focus groups to talk about later. So we made a white paper, we did XYZ. How did it resonate? And I think your client-facing teams, your frontline teams are fantastic resources for that gut check of what were you hearing in client conversations? What were you seeing? What seemed to work? And then was something missing? Was a 60-second explainer video too short for this? Would we need to go, into a longer format for that so that we're iterating that quadrant for the future and assessing what we may need going forward? But if you don't know if you succeeded or not, then it's really hard to iterate for next time. And then being realistic too, of course, when you are setting those goals at the beginning of a launch of, okay, quadrupling, active users on the platform within 2 weeks. Realistic or not, let's just be honest with ourselves, like what's achievable and finding that balance between aspirational and realistic. And that's a moving target, certainly, and always challenging to get, but getting to a goal that is realistic, potentially achievable, so that you can go back and assess what worked, what didn't, what could we do differently next time? And if you have a client advisory council, that's another area where we could leverage them and kind of get a sense for what is connecting with clients and what isn't.
Absolute gold. That's how I want to describe everything I just heard across the board today. So helpful. Amber, I love this. This is something where I am going to review this content frequently. So thank you so much for the insights. This is amazing. If anyone wants to reach out and further the conversation and connect with you, how and where can they find you?
Yeah, I love chatting with other marketing folks. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active. Amber Willett. If you want to grab a coffee, shoot me a DM. Always happy to chat, especially for those who are in the trenches as well.
Love it. Perfect. Well, Amber, again, thank you so much for the time and insights today. Have a good day.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Likewise.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.